Funny Games is an Austrian psychological thriller movie that was originally released in 1997, but like all good foreign language movies, they tend to get a worse remake in English, eventually. However, the 2007 version was actually directed by the same person that wrote and directed the original, and you can see that direction carrying over. But we're not here to talk about that one. We're here to discuss the extremely uncomfortable, unsettling, fourth wall breaking experience which puts us at the heart of the funny games that we're watching unfold on screen. With an ending that showed that the cycle would continue again and again, but a level of dissatisfaction being deliberately put upon us. I want to jump into the themes of the movie, answer the questions that we're left with, and discuss the ending. So let's get into it. Here is a breakdown of the 1997 movie Funny Games. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. And also, if you enjoy the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. One thing that separates this movie from many other psychological horrors is the fact that one of the home invaders, Paul, breaks the fourth wall on several occasions and speaks to us directly. He does that whilst also acknowledging the fact that the reality that he is in isn't real and that it's part of a movie, something which catches us off guard completely, and once it occurs, it starts the transition of giving the film a completely different feel. The first time we saw Paul speaking with us was when he was sending Anna to look for Rolfie, their German shepherd that he killed with a golf club. He turned to us and winked as she was looking, and at that moment, we then essentially transported through the screen and became witnesses to the events. Our presence was acknowledged by him. I also think the way that this movie was shot really leaned into the fact that we were a participant in the events that were taking place. Lots of static shots where it was almost like we were peering through a window and like a fly on the wall, merely observing and being bystanders to the events that were developing. Another time that he acknowledged the camera was when he spoke with the family and placed a bet on the fact that they'd all be dead by the time that 9 AM arrived in the morning. Paul spoke with us and said that he thought that we'd probably be on their side and want them to survive. And then, one of the final times that Paul acknowledged the camera was when he arrived at Gerda's house, the woman in the Ivy Lake house, and he asked her for eggs, insinuating that the murderous cycle was going to start all over again. What the acknowledgement does is it brings us into the picture and makes us a part of the movie. It wants us to be involved because by having a stake in it, we're more invested. And by us being more invested, when things don't go the way that we predicted, with at least one of the family members surviving, we naturally start to feel more uncomfortable. It's said that the point of the movie is to show how desensitized we've become to seeing violence in horror and thriller movies. So what this film does is it leaves it up to our imagination to imagine what's going on in the other room. We never saw a killing take place or a death. It all occurred whilst a character was in the other room or whilst the camera was facing in the opposite direction. Don't get me wrong, the movie was gory at points and there was a lot of blood, but we never saw the violent acts taking place, only the aftermath, which almost hits harder when you don't see it taking place because we didn't know exactly what happened. For example, the fact that the last we saw of Georgie was him lying on the floor, dead, with blood pouring out of him, knowing that Peter killed him and didn't even bat an eyelid. It's utterly horrific. What young kid normally dies in a horror movie in such a brutal fashion? The answer to that is they simply don't. The fourth wall breaking lured us into a false sense of security and believing that some of the family, or at least one of the family members, would survive. After all, they were the first people that we were introduced to, so naturally you presume that they're the ones that we're following. But in reality, as the movie develops, you soon come to realize that this isn't a film about a wealthy family that's taking a vacation that gets interrupted. This is the sinister tale of two individuals that break into houses for fun, kill for entertainment, and their story was set to continue. The film flips things on its head constantly, and the fourth wall breaking was a prime example of that, to add to the uncomfortable nature of it. Why did the ending rewind and then change? Something that the movie did as it was reaching the climax was, whilst Anna was being forced to play a game called The Loving Wife, which meant that she had to recite a prayer word for word backwards to decide who would die first out of herself and her husband, and also decide how they'd die, she grabbed the shotgun and then shot Peter, something which Paul didn't expect to happen at all. Once this happened, in a panicked state, he said, "Where's the remote?" And he rewound the scene back in time, but this time he anticipated her going for the weapon and stopped her. This then meant that she wasn't able to kill Peter, and instead she lost the game because she broke the rules, which meant that George was killed and then Anna eventually went on to be killed too. This was done for a couple of different reasons. The first is because I feel the movie wanted to push its genre-defining boundaries even further, and like what it did throughout the entirety of the movie, it wanted us to feel uncomfortable in a completely different way. The second was because as Peter and Paul were discussing themselves at the end, the line between what is reality and what is fiction was a key talking point. It seemed like Paul was fully aware of the fact that he was within a film, as on several occasions he mentioned that he couldn't kill the family at a certain point because it hadn't reached a feature-length time frame yet. And when asked by George why they hadn't killed them yet, they said, "Don't forget the entertainment value, you'll deprive us of the pleasure." It was all about the entertainment for them and providing entertainment for us, because we've grown accustomed to seeing it on screen. With the film being centered around flipping things on its head, when Anna killed Peter, we were lured into a false sense of security that in fact everything was about to get better for her and George. But in reality, that was never going to happen, because if it did, it would have followed the traditional storytelling tropes and approaches. So by doing the rewind, it showed us that there was never going to be a happy ending, and that the film was going to leave no survivors, and we would in fact lose the bet. Even right at the end of the movie, when Anna was taken to the boat, we then saw the knife that was knocked down at the start of the movie, and we were led to believe that in one final attempt she might have been able to survive, as would be the case in a normal movie, but she didn't. She was just thrown into the water and left to die off screen. This was also present when she was looking for help on the side of the road. In that moment, we questioned if Peter and Paul would be in the car, or if she'd actually get help, but of course she didn't get help. The rewinding feature was a mechanism in the film to really lean into the anti-feel that the movie was going for, and that when we start to think that the tables are going to turn and there might be a happy ending, they just aren't going to. So it just goes against the grain even more. My review of the movie. Funny Games is a really uncomfortable watch, but it's an uncomfortable watch for all of the right reasons. As I said in the earlier part of the video, this film is created to be the opposite of everything that we've come to expect in horror and thriller movies. We don't see the killing, we don't see any protagonists survive, the fourth wall gets broken, and we're transported through the screen as if we're there. We see the aftermath, which is damaging, and I'd argue it proves to be more effective in this movie because your other senses, such as your hearing, is used to piece together what's happened in the other room. Even though we didn't really see any violence, having an 11-minute single-take shot of the crime scene where Georgie was lying there and Anna was breaking down, followed by George Sr. breaking down, it was utterly horrific in a completely different way. Plus, also the small moments like Anna walking past the door and throwing up because she caught a glimpse of her dead son in the corner of her eye. That was something that yet again was left up to our imagination, and it just sat in my mind. These were all things that we felt rather than saw, and it was a different kind of experience. The way that this film was shot with regards to the extreme close-ups and what one would describe as people almost walking into frame rather than them being the focal point was a really interesting decision. I interpreted that as it being like us peeping through the window rather than following certain characters. The beginning of the movie was a real tone setter, and at the time you don't really realize how much of a tone setter it was. For example, it started with a lingering shot of the car journey to the lake house with classical music playing, and then during the journey this heavy rock music started playing over the top, which provided a total contrast to what we'd just heard, almost like the way that the film just switched. I liked the fact that we were first introduced to the home invaders at the side of the road. They weren't anything to worry about in the opening few minutes, but the fact that Georgie said, "Who were those two boys?" and it was brushed over was enough to make your mind wonder just how important they'd be. In terms of the performances, they were all really strong. There isn't a weak performance in the cast at all. The family each express fear in a way that you genuinely buy, and because you don't see the violence happening, you spend a lot of time with close-ups on their faces and seeing their reactions, so you do feel for them a lot of the time. The performances from the home invaders are also really strong too. Their kindness on occasions in saying things like, "Could you kindly get me something to eat from the kitchen?" and then contrasting it with cruel violent behaviour was extremely unsettling to watch. The film doesn't wait around in getting us into the story and the hostage situation that's at play. When I was doing my research on the movie, I saw that many of the cast members within it are now dead. For example, the actor that played George Sr. is dead, the actor that played Anna is dead, and also the actor that played Peter is dead too. I don't know why I found that so unsettling, but maybe it's just because of the context of the movie that when I searched up the cast and saw that, it just made my stomach drop slightly. I would really recommend this film, more so than the 2007 one. It's also higher rated than the remake. It's one that's been on my list for a while, and after recently watching Speak No Evil, I thought it was about time. So, there you have it, a breakdown of the 1997 movie Funny Games. If you want to see more of your favourite TV shows and movies broken down, then click on the card in the top corner, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. And finally, if you'd like to see what I gave this movie out of 5 stars, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of this movie? Would you like to see a breakdown of the 2007 version? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.